I'll- Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. How are you? Nice to see you. I am Lisa Jubilee. I'm here today for the second of LWA Wellness Program's Nutrition Lunch and Learn sessions. And today's topic is one that I have to say has been one of the most common topics that I've been asked about in my nutrition practice, and that is how to manage stress and emotional eating. And it's been a very common topic, but in particular this year, due to the pandemic and the social and professional limitations and restrictions it's demanded from us, historic political climate and the recent election that we just went through, the social kind of unrest that we dealt with over the summer has all contributed to an uptick in the use of food as a coping mechanism. And so I felt that since it's such a pervasive issue lately, particularly this year and globally, I thought that perhaps most of you would find it helpful to talk about as well. And speaking of, just one other thing to mention, speaking of how it's become such a global issue this year due to the pandemic in particular, I'm sure you are familiar with in March and April hearing a lot of reports in the news and articles about people gaining the COVID-19 or the uh, quarantine 15. So it's a kind of a global issue, using food as a coping mechanism. So today, what I'm going to cover is what emotional and stress eating actually is. And I'd like to go over a little mini questionnaire with you, just 6 questions long, on what are some signs of emotional eating, why we do it, what are the downsides to doing it? And I've included 5 quick tips, behaviors that you can learn as alternatives to returning to food or utilizing food as a coping mechanism to stress and emotional eating. Okay. And then at the end, I actually added in some additional tips on managing stress in general. Okay. So let's talk about what is emotional or stress eating. So it literally is eating in response to our emotions. It's usually negative emotions like anger and fear and anxiety and loneliness, but even happiness, even positive emotions we can tend to turn to food for. And it's not an issue at all on occasion. I mean, it's part of our culture. We have a holiday coming up next week, right? Thanksgiving, and I'm sure many of us are going to be eating a piece of pumpkin pie or a second piece of pie or extra serving of stuffing for reasons not due to hunger. So that's fine. No problem doing that. It's normal. Emotional eating and stress eating becomes an issue when it becomes a habitual coping mechanism, a reason on an ongoing basis that people respond to their emotions, and which ultimately leads to additional stress or negative emotions. So when it becomes an emotional loop, that's when we need to address it. So what I'd like to have happen now, if at all possible, I know there's a number of you here. I know your cameras are off, but I was wondering if we're going to talk about some signs of emotional and stress eating now. I wanted to cover a 6-question questionnaire with you. If you're able to respond, we were thinking that perhaps you could just respond with a thumbs up if you can't comment in the chat, and let me know after I ask you all 6 questions. Send me a thumbs up if you answered yes to one or more of the questions, and just if you can respond with a no in the chat, fine. If not, I think Deborah and I realized you may not be able to comment, but I'd like it to be interactive. So let's see what we can do. Okay. So the first question, okay, is these are signs of emotional eating. How after an unpleasant experience, such as an argument, do you, and it's covered up here a little bit, do you eat even if you're not hungry? Okay. So you're going to hold off. Let me ask all 6 first. Number 2, do you crave specific foods when you're upset, like always desiring chocolate or a pint of ice cream or chips when you're sad or depressed? Okay. Number 3, okay, do you feel the urge to eat in response to outside cues like watching TV or seeing advertisements when you're at the movies? Okay, on a regular basis. Number 4, Do you eat because you feel there's nothing else to do to fill the void, okay, of boredom? Number 5, does eating make you feel better when you're down, or does it make you feel less focused on problems when you're worried about something? Okay. And number 6, do you reach for a snack when you're pressured or working under a deadline? Okay. So these are 6 of many, just 6. There's many other questions on longer questionnaires regarding emotional and stress eating. But if there's any way you can interact and let me know if you answered yes to any of these questions, that would be great. If you can't, that's okay. Okay, so no, and you're, thank you for the interaction. Yes, okay. Matthew, anybody else? Okay. Okay, because just so you know, I read a survey recently that over 75% of overeating to some extent has to do with stress and emotional eating. Okay, so it's such a common issue, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today. So it's so common, okay? So why do we do it? Where did this come from? Okay, it's not instinctive, it's not genetic, okay? So why do we stress eat? Okay, thanks for the interaction and the interactive responses. So let's talk about why we do it, okay? So there are a number of reasons, but one of the most common reasons we eat in response to our emotions is to seek comfort from food, okay? And where does that come from, okay? We do it for psychological and physiological reasons. And one of the very common reasons we do it is because of the deeply ingrained childhood associations that we develop around food and our moods. I'm sure we all can think of examples of being children, toddlers even, okay, and having our parents, grandparents, or some adult rewarding us with food in response to how we felt. So a couple examples: getting a good grade at school, right? You get a treat, or excellent performance at your school play. Or on the opposite side of that, if you had a bad day at school, somebody made fun of you, your parent wants you to help you to feel better, you'll get rewarded with food, okay? Just the other week, a client was giving me an example because we were talking about this exact issue. And she said, yeah, she remembers even as a child going to the doctor. Maybe she, cried a little bit, but sat there, got her vaccine, and even in the doctor's office, got a lollipop, right? So the point is, our childhood associations with food are so deeply ingrained because they've been reinforced year after year after year after year. And the majority of our eating habits are developed in childhood. So by the time we're adults, it's almost instinctive, okay? Another reason we turn to food as a coping mechanism is to fill an emotional void. Very common use of food, unfortunately, right? To fill emotional voids, like in place of human interaction, right? Or companionship. Good example of that is, right, I'm sure we can all think of times when we maybe had an argument with even a parent or a spouse, a partner, right? Even our roommates, and felt the urge to eat in response to those emotions. Another reason we use emotions to fill voids, use food to fill emotional voids is using food as entertainment, okay? To fill the void of boredom. Or as one of my clients says, eating for sport. And this was very common in March and April. Globally, people were baking bread. I've read many articles. People were gaining weight because they were eating in response to being cooped up in quarantine type lifestyle situations, and many of them being laid off. So food took the place of other activities. And as a procrastination tactic, another very common one, I hear from clients many times when they have a big deadline at work or a presentation to prepare for, they find themselves snacking more just to break up the stress that they're feeling from the pressure of the task that they have to do. So those are some reasons we turn to food in response to our emotions. Those are some psychological reasons. Then a physiological reason we might tend to turn to food in response to our emotions is literally because when we are under chronic stress, the primary stress hormone cortisol is constantly elevated, which is not great. And one of the side effects of this is that elevated cortisol can lead to an increase in the release of ghrelin, which is one of the main hunger hormones. So you could actually, if you're under chronic stress, actually feel physiologically and psychologically hungrier, right? So Food does serve a purpose, okay, when we're feeling a chronic stress. Another reason we turn to food in response to our emotions is because food can function as a numbing strategy or an escape route in a sense. So similar to the use of alcohol or drugs or sex, all these activities and substances can help us to feel better, so to speak, temporarily. So in a sense, food can act as a buffer between the person and how they're actually feeling. In a sense, right? Function as a numbing strategy. So that's another reason we do it. Okay? Another very powerful physiological reason we turn to food, and particularly certain types of food when we're feeling stress or some type of emotional distress, is due to the dopamine rush, right? Or sugar high. And I don't know about you, but in the 2 decades as a nutritionist, consulting nutritionist, I've never had anyone tell me that they eat excess protein or vegetables when they're feeling stressed. Okay. So no one's grabbing a bowl of shrimp or eating an extra piece of salmon. We're turning to some form of carbohydrate, i.e., sugar, because all forms of carbohydrate, whether it's savory, sweet, okay, salty, all breaks down into sugar. And research has shown that sugar, like heroin and cocaine, literally can trigger the release of dopamine, which is one of the most powerful feel-good neurotransmitters in the brain. It can literally release that hormone, and what ends up happening is it floods the part of the brain that's responsible for pleasure and reward. Coupled with, okay, sugars, another effect it has on our brain is that it actually can release endogenous opioids, which are natural painkillers. So sugar literally is effective at making us feel better temporarily, okay? Just like these other drugs, these illicit drugs do, okay? There's been studies even on rats too. They've done the Oreo, there's this study where they've given rats cocaine and Oreos. And the rats always choose the Oreos over the cocaine, okay? So sugar is very addictive, and there's a very good reason why. So yes, it's effective. So what's the problem, right? Sugar does actually make us feel better. So let's talk about why turning to food as a coping mechanism is a issue, okay? So I'm pretty sure you can see, even though I'm blocked a little bit by this diagram, but I'm sure you can see it fully. Let me know if you can't with a thumbs down, and I'll move the screen. But what are the downsides of turning to food in response to our moods? Well, it's temporary. It's a temporary fix. No amount of food can satisfy emotional hunger, in a sense. Okay, and so what usually happens is during the when there's an emotion that triggers the behavior, there's some situation that happens, right, that triggers the emotion. And I'm just moving this over so I can guide you through this. And then what usually happens is there's an urge to eat. That's the immediate response. And usually what happens is you overeat because food can't satisfy that emotional need. And if we stopped here, it wouldn't be such a problem. Okay. But what usually happens in this emotional eating cycle or loop is that after the food consumption and or the alcohol, whatever it might be that you're consuming in response to your emotions, it's followed up by deprecating thoughts, self-deprecating thoughts like guilt, frustration, disappointment in oneself, feeling powerless over the food. And it usually leads to a term many of my clients and I have coined, the F-its, meaning you don't care at the moment, so it continues to happen, okay? Until afterwards when the negative emotions kick in. So it ends up compounding the problem. That's why stress, turning to food in response to stress and emotions, is not constructive long term. Again, you do it once in a while, it's natural. But as a primary coping mechanism, it can lead to a lot of things beyond just overeating and weight gain. So we're humans. Of course, we're going to feel emotions, negative emotions, okay? What we need to do is find some alternative coping mechanisms that won't be so damaging, so to speak, okay? So what I want to cover now is my top 5 tips that I've recommended to my clients, I utilize in my practice. These are tips you can use in the moment, okay? Instantaneous things, impulsive things you can do instead of immediately turning to food. So number one of the 5 is what I term the 10-minute rule, okay? So in that 10-minute time period, right, something kicked in, something happened, you got an argument, some stressful incident happened. Instead of turning to food in response, wait 10 minutes. The purpose of this tip is to give yourself time to pause, okay? And so during that 10-minute period, ask yourself these 3 questions. Why do I want to eat? How am I going to feel afterwards? And is it going to be worth it? Allow the present you to help out the future you, okay? Because just like any other drugs, feels good in the moment, but usually it's followed up by withdrawal, okay? Some withdrawal symptoms at some point. So in this case, gives you time to stop, pause, think about how you want to react to the emotions, okay? I strongly recommend writing them down. Helps to reinforce this behavior, gives you also more time, something to do during the 10 minutes, okay? So this 10-minute rule is effective and can be very effective on its own, but coupled with number 2, okay, can be even more effective. And number 2 is what I call the 16-ounce chug. So what does that do? So the whole point of the 16-ounce chug, referring to drinking 16 ounces of room temperature water quite kind of quickly, chugging it, not sipping it, okay? The whole point of doing that, in particular with the 10-minute rule, is A, gives you something to do during the 10 minutes. If you've written down those questions, give you something to do, occupy yourself instead of eating. And then physically, by chugging the 16 ounces of water, gives you a physical sensation of fullness, which can help curb, we know water can curb physical hunger, but can also be effective in curbing some emotional hunger. And then you'll feel some sensation of something in your stomach, maybe not absolute fullness, but you'll feel a sensation, and that can help curb your desire to add more to it by eating, okay? So these 2 tips can work independently of each other, but are very effective as a deterrent from eating in response to your emotions when you pair them together, okay? Number 3 is what I call step away and get wet, okay? So this tip is very effective too in the situation where you're in an environment that's triggering you to want to eat, whether you're at your office. This year, most of us are working from home. So that's actually posed more of a challenge to a lot of people because the access to food is so close by and available. And so step away and get wet is the recommendation here is to remove yourself from the environment which triggers the temptation to eat. And instead of perhaps going to the kitchen or going to where the food is, the recommendation is to step away and go to the restroom, okay? Stand by the sink. Okay, now the second part of this, the get wet part, requires the use of hydrotherapy or water therapy. Okay? So first of all, water therapy has been a long recognized practice, effective practice in non-Western cultures and in naturopathic medicine for its multitude of health benefits. One of those benefits is that water has the ability to increase the release of certain feel-good hormones or neurotransmitters, these endorphins, similar to the way sugar functions, okay? So let's use water to our advantage instead of consuming food when we're in fight or flight mode, okay? So the recommendation here with the step away and get wet strategy is to go to the restroom. One strategy is run water, warm or cold water under the insides of your wrists, okay, for 10 seconds or more. Just stand there and do that instead of eating, right? Or place a cold or wet, doesn't have to be cold, even warm towel or paper towel, damp towel, face cloth on the back of your neck. Water releases oxytocin, okay? Same kind of hormone that's released when a mother gives birth to her baby, holds the baby. When we see puppies, you know that feeling, okay? Hugs, intimacy, oxytocin's released. Water has that ability, Okay, so let's use that. So third one is if you're home and you have time, take a shower, get in the bath if you have time, or even soak your feet in Epsom salts. Okay, warm water and Epsom salts. I should have added that on, but what I want you to know is that Epsom salts are magnesium. Okay, and magnesium is known as the anti-stress mineral. So it's very effective to absorb magnesium as a relaxing mechanism through transdermally through the skin, and it also can be effective taking it supplementally. Okay, so magnesium, remember that, is the anti-stress mineral. Okay, so that's number 3. Step away and get wet. Use water to your advantage. Okay, that's something you can do right in the moment. Okay, number 4 of my quick tips for tackling emotional and stress eating is purge in print. Okay, instead of suppressing the emotions, right, and kind of numbing them with food, my recommendation is to release them. Okay, sooner the better. Okay, and purge meaning purge those emotions in print. Okay, so grab your phone, use the notes app in your phone, post it, piece of paper, write it down manually, just whatever's in your head, write down the expletive. It doesn't have to be it's something you're conjuring up, but whatever you're thinking about, write down the person's name, write down a sentence, who you're pissed at, just get it out. Okay, that's the whole point. Release it. Okay, if you can talk to somebody, even better. If you don't have somebody to verbalize it to, use the restroom again, go to the mirror, say it to yourself out loud, yell to that person, pretend you're speaking to them, get it out, yell in a pillow if you're home. There's many ways to release the emotions other than suppressing them with food. Okay, so that's number 4, purge and print. Okay, number 5, a very effective one, is turn on a tune. Okay, and again, it's interesting, right? With this pandemic, again, as I mentioned, there's been a increase in the use of food as a coping mechanism. Another time I saw this was around 9/11. So we know during stressful times, people tend to utilize food and substances to cope with their feelings. Okay, so these are real practical strategies. And so, who doesn't like music? So turn on a tune instead. Put your headphones on if you're home and no one's around. Play it out loud and allow yourself to listen to a song or two to calm yourself down. Science has shown that music is very effective at having a positive effect on our emotions, okay? Our mind and our body, even. And so they've done a lot of studies on classical music, but it doesn't matter what type of music you like. Put on what's going to be effective for you, okay? So I recommend playing a song or two if you have. That's 3 to 6 minutes at the most. If you can, sing to it, release, again, a way of physically releasing the emotions, do that. Dance around in your home or your apartment if you can, okay? So these are the 5 tips, okay? Again, 10-minute rule, 16-ounce chug, step away and get wet, purge in print, turn on a tune. Use these strategies to try to immediately instead of coping with your emotions with food, use these strategies as an immediate release from your emotions. They give you time to think about how you want to manage the situation, okay? Because food cannot satisfy any kind of emotional hunger, okay? So what I have here at the end is just some additional suggestions on how to manage stress in general, okay? Again, we're all human. Stress is going to come over us. Other emotional situations that are distressful are going to occur. And so let's start to learn other ways of coping with our emotions that are more productive for us. So exercise and movement, there's been a litany of studies that show how effective that is even for depression. It's one of the best natural stress relievers, exercise. And so we're coming up to winter season and we know we're going to be indoors the majority of the time. So it's a good idea to try to kind of plan some kind of indoor exercise strategy. There's a good chance the gyms are going to be, shut down again too. So let's keep that in mind. Exercise, make that a priority in our lifestyles. Okay, meditation, thank goodness, is gaining momentum in our world as a form of a way of a technique for managing stress. And a lot of schools even are now using it. I know many corporations now are including it in their wellness programs. Schools are using it instead of sending kids to the principal's office to help the children to manage their emotions. So it's very effective at improving our psychological well-being. If you're new to meditation, I've included here a link to one of the guided meditation apps, Headspace. It's very common. And you don't have to do meditation for long. If you're just new to it, just even a 10-minute guided meditation would be a great start, but it can have a very powerful effect on our psyche. And emotional freedom technique is another very effective treatment strategy for emotional distress. It also is effective for physical pain as well. And if you're not familiar with it, I also included a link here. You're going to get this PDF after today's session. So all of these links will be available to you. And EFT is a combination of traditional psychology and Chinese acupressure. So these are some strategies that you can also learn, and they can be very helpful in managing stress and emotional eating, but just stress in general. Okay, so that's what I have for you today on the topic of how do we manage stress and emotional eating. And I see we have a few minutes left. It's about 3 minutes or so. So if anyone has any questions for me, let me know. Okay. And if not, again, my contact info is here. You'll get this PDF, so you can all reach out to me at any time, send me an email, let me know if you have any questions. Okay. So, any questions for me today? Okay. Okay. So, if not, anyone? All right. Okay. Do you have a question? I don't, your audio isn't on? Yeah. Okay. Let's unmute. Okay. Let's see. Are you able to unmute, Deborah? Oh, there we go.
I'm able to unmute you. I just had a question for you, Lisa. It's Drew.
Yeah, great.
So this is actually very helpful. I think one of my common areas where it hits me is eating out of boredom, which is certainly on your list there. Do you know from any of your studies or reading that if any of these 4 tips that you had provided might help that one more than others, like the water therapy, hydrotherapy, certain endorphins, help the boredom aspect more than the stress or emotional side of things?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yes. So of those strategies, the one that I would say would be most effective for boredom eating, or eating just to kind of fill the void, would be the music one, because I think that would be entertaining, right? Give you something to do, right? That's the one of the 5 that I think would be the most effective.
The 5, sorry. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Because you're right. A lot of the other ones, right? The step away and get wet is more about distress. So that's the one I would use in that case. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anyone else for today? Okay. So Deborah, is there anything else in closing? I'll send you the PDF, and feel free, please, anyone, to reach out to me. I have my contact information here, my 2 websites, lisajubileenutrition.com and livingproofnyc.com. And I will be conducting my 3rd and final session on December 10th, Thursday, December 10th. And that's going to be an open forum. That's Ask Your Nutritionist. Okay, so I do recommend maybe sending Deborah a few questions, everyone, a couple days beforehand, so I can include your questions in the presentation. And I thought to touch on topics like, keto and intermittent fasting, maybe, gluten-free. That's a big common one, but that's in the wellness world. So I'd like to hear what everybody else is interested in hearing. Okay, so, okay, good. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and I hope to see you next time.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you all. Take care.